gear this week to review. I will probably be able to get some next week. Today I'm going to show you how I regrip swords. This one is the Torvik Trainer sword. It's a little bit late period for what we do, but it's a little bit safer for new people to use because of the crossguard. It's kind of been through the beater, and the grip is usually the thing that breaks on every sword. I have the utmost confidence that even if you used something with the quality of, let's say, an Albion, for a long period of time, the grip would suffer. Usually it's just a leather wrap. Sometimes the handles break. Luckily, armor class swords are made with what appears to be oak, so they're a lot more durable than some other ones that are using some exotic woods and things. Most of the ones made in China are using, in my opinion, questionable woods for the grips. They're just not quite as strong as they need to be. But this is just if the leather wrap goes off on your sword. And so this one, for this you basically just need to draft up a pattern for the grip. If you don't know how to do that, my pattern drafting video, the link is here. And beyond that, you just need a piece of leather that's big enough for your pattern and a leather strip that is long enough to do the job. If not, you can splice it. And then for tools, you just need something to cut the leather. In my case, it's a rotary cutter because it's easy. And you need a hole punch. Either this type or the type that you hammer into. You could also use an awl. It'll just mean that you have to stretch the holes a little bit in order to get it done. So I will give you a closer look and we'll get started. And you can't forget about coffee. Coffee is important for crafting. So just as a note, if anyone's interested in this particular sword, it is the armor class, I believe it's listed as 11th and 12th century Norman. This pattern I've also seen listed as Romanesque, which is just the first part of the Norman period before it started to slide into the Gothic period. So that's that on this type of sword. So it's a little late for Viking, but really works well for a trainer sword. Again, because armor class products are really, really, really tough. This is real evidence of that. The notches in the blade, that they're pretty deep, but they're all still rounded out and everything. And the blade is deadly straight, even though I assume this thing has taken some pretty heavy thrusts to shields and things. Because the newer people obviously aren't as experienced. They don't know how to pull blows with a thrust as well as somebody who's a little more experienced. But yeah, very tough product. I still hold true to what I said in the other armor class video. So the first thing you want to do after you've cut out your pieces is to punch a few holes. There's a few ways to attach the grip. Most of them involve glue, and those are for a very permanent thing. What I find with this is that if you have a way to wrap it that doesn't involve putting glue back on it, when one part of the wrap is destroyed, you can just, take the whole thing off and put it back on, or put a new piece on, without having to contend with peeling it off with the glue and all that stuff. If you use a proper contact cement, it will hold it longer, but then when it comes time to remove it, it'll be a pain to remove, especially if you use something like barge, which I highly recommend. Barge is one of the best contact cements I've been able to find, and it's actually designed for shoe repair. So keep that in mind. Won't need it for this project, but that glue is amazing. So with this, it's basically just held on by the tension of the buckskin, because buckskin is a little bit different than cowhide in the sense that it has quite a bit of stretch to it. So when you pull on it really tight, you're actually spring loading this, so it actually wants to to go back to its normal dimension. So it's actually putting a lot more tension than you could get with cowhide. Buckskin's also a lot stronger. I think the grain of it is a lot more dense, and so it's a very, very, very tough thing to use for lacing. And buckskin is totally period because the Norse hunted reindeer and everything. I wouldn't be too concerned about what species it comes from because it pretty much all, to the average person, looks identical. Moose hide would be better, but moose hide is a lot thicker. So, to start off, you decide which direction you want your wrap to start. I believe it's easier to go from smaller end to bigger end. So, what you do is you take your hole punch and make sure that everything's lined up on it, because sometimes these can shift and then it doesn't punch the hole properly. You figure out which direction you want to wrap as well, and you start by punching a single hole almost right in the corner. Then right in line with this, you punch second hole with that kind of a spacing. And then you punch a third hole with the same spacing, or as close to it as you can get. Now you take your piece of lacing and you taper the end like this. I just set it down on the board and cut it with the rotary cutter. Scissors work really well with this too, a little more control. Less risk of cutting your fingers. So then what you do is you stick the end of it through the hole, down into it, and pull it fairly tight, fairly into the taper. Then you go back up, and pull that so that it's flush, or flat there, and then put it back down through. And so you have a little bit of a tail here. And this actually essentially locks it in to this piece of fabric, or a piece of leather. Now you take it to your grip, and you wrap it around. And if your piece of leather isn't quite long enough, it's okay. You just kind of hope that it stretches. And buckskin is good for both of these. It would be period. More period than this. I just chose to go with this because it's what I had, and I think the green and brown look good together. And because of the fact that this sword isn't good for the period, it can't really be used for shows so much, so it doesn't really matter what the grip looks like. It could be a total fantasy thing because it's just a training sword anyway. And then you basically try and line it up so that this join is on the side. It just looks a little nicer that way. And then you start wrapping around. The first wrap you won't be able to get too much tension on it because the whole thing will slide. So now I get just past the join in the leather, and then I start to do my cross wraps around. So then I'm just constantly pulling on there to make sure that everything lines up, and pulling under a fair amount of tension. Just so that I know that this section will actually be held in properly. And it always takes a little bit of playing around with it to get it perfect. And this particular sort, it doesn't have to necessarily be perfect. I just want it to look as nice as possible. If you're rewrapping a sword for your costume, it would need to be, or for your kit, it would need to be very nice, very clean lines and everything. Then it's basically just wrapping it around and pulling it to make sure it's all snug and making sure the ends are tucked in. And making sure that it crosses in the appropriate section. The mistake I made here was I didn't leave quite enough for a decent overlap. So I have a little bit of the color of the wood poking through. It's just something you have to take into consideration. So this strip of leather isn't going to be quite long enough. So I'm going to show you how to put in a splice. I just have to go cut another section of this strip. So I'll be back in a moment. So in order to show this properly, I had to unwrap a section. But the concept is basically the same as attaching the strip to the sheet. And it's basically punching a series of holes that next layer of the cordage or the strip will go through. Same process. And then in this case, again, I took the end of it and snipped it to a sort of taper shape, and it can be it should be fairly long so that you don't have as much bunching up or anything, and so that it doesn't flare this hole too much. Because if it flares the hole too much, then you'll end up with a wider section here than there should be, and the end of the strap won't cover it as much. Then you just pull it through, and one thing to keep in mind is that this will be a visible thing unless you find a way to cover it up in your wrap. So the neater you can make this, the better. And if you can make a nice join in it that isn't too ugly, it kind of shows a little bit of extra craftsmanship that you wouldn't see otherwise. And so it's still, you know, kind of a thing. You can see the join, but you end up with just seeing this in the wrap. So it's not as big of a problem as you would think. So now you can continue your wrap. And just making sure that everything is just nice and snugged up. And then when you get to your join, you have to make sure that you don't pull it too much, because it will slide. And if you have too much that is sticking out, that it doesn't look particularly nice, you just snip it off, making sure you have at least a good 1/2 inch or so underneath. and just snugging it. Now this next little piece, you can't really pull too hard on it. And this end section, you can add just a little bit of bulk to the end of the handle if you want to keep it a very tapered thing. I find that if there's a little extra bulk here, it either gives you something that you can tuck your pinky finger around down here, so your hand's not up against the quillion, or it can also be there to keep your hand up here and keep it from sliding. Sort of just a personal preference. Some people would argue totally opposites on that, so it's not too much of a thing. So then I find out where I kind of want the wrap to end. So I would be right about here. So then what I do is I go back one wrap and I punch a hole with the biggest hole punch I have right in the center of the lace. And that can be a little tricky sometimes. And then afterwards you want to make sure that there's tension. You want to make sure there's tension on the one side, the already wrapped side of this hole. Once you have the hole punched, so that everything stays nice and tight. Sometimes this buckskin can be a little hard to punch with these punches. It doesn't want to be quite cooperative sometimes, because it is a very, very durable material. So now I just have to rewrap this section. Get it to the point there with the hole. Then you put your thumb underneath it and you wrap it around, and that gets you to here. And then what I normally do is snip this off out about there, and just snip the end into a very, doesn't have to be anything special, just a very obtuse or very cute point. Sorry. Now this then goes into the hole, just to, and then now you want to apply tension around and just shift everything around a bit while it's still somewhat loose. I want to keep it below that collet. The collet on the end there, and just shift it all down and around and make it look nice. And then you want to pull on the thing like your life depends on it. You know, not too hard that you snap your cordage, but you want to pull, because what you're doing is pulling it around and through itself, and that kind of holds it in tension. So then once you have it as tight as you want it, you snip it off about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch above where you have it. And so you could keep it with this end exposed. That would allow you to be able to, if it falls off, it'd be maybe a little easier for you to put it back on. But that doesn't look very nice, not in the slightest. So one thing that I like to do is I find a section of the wrap that's next to it, not necessarily somewhere not necessarily anywhere in particular. And I take a pen or something like that that has a fairly pointy end on it. Sometimes helps if you have two objects, so you can actually lift the corner of the thing, and you basically just start working it underneath. What works better than a pen is an awl. An awl with a slightly pointy end, not too sharp, works really well for this. And it's basically just getting it pushed up under, and you can sort of pry up the edge of it, slip the edge of your piece underneath it, and then just tuck away and just work the edge of the piece you're sticking it under over top of it. Try to get it as far under there as possible, and that way it stands a higher chance of staying, basically. Now these wraps do come undone. It's not unheard of with heavy use, and so I just think that in a case like this, it's better to have something that you can fix in the field than have something that you need to fix with glue. The grips, they're not hugely important with the leather because the wood is just fine. It's just the leather makes it feel a lot nicer, and makes it look a lot nicer and everything. And nobody really wants kit that looks bad, even if it's just a trainer sword. It makes people a little more excited about it when the piece of kit they're using looks nice. So that's the basic wrap. This one's a little messy. The cross doesn't quite line up and everything, but it serves its purpose. And that's both the splice and the end. The neater you can get them, the better. This one kind of rolled up on me, and to me that looks really ugly. But again, it serves its purpose. And this, it sort of bunched up and everything, but that's okay too. So that's how I do a quick and dirty re-gripping of a sword without glue. It definitely won't last as long as with glue on it, but when it does break, it'll be easier to fix. And on a trainer sword, that's something that you kind of want. Something that you can, sit down for 15 minutes or so and just rewrap it with limited tools and limited materials. So there is another way to do this as well, where you don't use the leather underneath. You just use the strip. Same width of the strip. It's about 1/2 inch. And same basic technique, except for at the beginning you just leave a tail going down, and then from there you just twist it around and wrap it around itself, which holds that end in place. And then when you get to the end, you do this kind of thing in the end of it. I didn't do that for this sword because that one holds a lot better with glue. It'll shift around and everything if you don't have glue on it. But it can be done without glue. And I also didn't quite have the appropriate length for that, because it probably would have taken 3 lengths of this to do that. So that's how I wrap these. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. And if you liked what you see, please like and subscribe. Thank you.